VETtalk Radio is proudly supported by the Animal Referral Hospital.
This week.
Cats may have 9 lives, but did you know there are also 9 feline personality types too?
Of the 9 personality types, I've never yet found a cat owner that can't place their cat in the type group.
Discover your cat's personality type in a moment.
Plus, the South Australian government wants to make desexing of all dogs and cats compulsory prior to sale. The Australian Veterinary Association says that won't work.
I think as a prospective pet owner, I would like to have control over, if you like, how my pet was desexed, rather than my breeder doing possibly a bulk deal with minimal pain relief and analgesia and care, because that animal has to be desexed before the point of sale.
And have you ever heard of bloat? It can be deadly for dogs.
So it's not just a bloated stomach, it's actually a bloated and twisted stomach.
And would you know the signs of dementia in your dog? A world-first trial is looking for more suitable dogs to be part of a groundbreaking research. More on that a little later in the show.
G'day, I'm Browne Pickering.
And I'm Kaye Browne.
All those stories and more right here on VETtalk with our latest podcast, available every Saturday on vettalkradio.com.au and also available free in the iTunes store. We don't have cats, and so it hasn't been easy for us to actually, ascertain whether or not cats have personalities. They just go meow, meow, meow when they want food, right?
Yeah, and well, except for the ones that do naughty things in my garden outside.
Well, apart from those.
We have.
And they're neighbours' cats, and that's a personality in itself, I suppose, being able to do that. But someone who's got some information on personality traits of cats, I really didn't think they had them, is Dr. Jo Sillince from Pets Australia. G'day, Jo.
G'day, you're being mean to the cats.
Really? Why?
And you're probably being meaner to the cat owners because they know that their cats have got personality.
Really?
And of the 9 personality types, I've never yet found a cat owner that can't place their cat in the type group.
9? There are 9 different types? I mean, there's Garfield types, there's ugly cat types.
Now listen, I'm bilingual. I've owned dogs and cats in my life and I enjoy both. So you've got to be careful not to insult we cat owners. There are actually 9 quite well-defined types. This is science, it's not anecdote. It's actually been published in peer-reviewed journals.
Someone got paid to come up with 9 personality traits?
And it was developed by the American Society for the Prevention of Animal Cruelty, the ASPCA. One of their veterinarians who was dealing with a lot of cats over a long time started to notice it and then started to study it, and lo and behold, it's now published. So it's very well supported in science. And they use it as a shelter tool so that you can work out what the culture of your family is, work out what the culture of the cat that you want is, and then go and choose a cat by description. And basically it works around 3 parameters. How exploratory the cat is. In other words, is it curious and inquisitive and likes to explore, or is it actually even a little afraid of new experiences? How social the cat is in relation to humans and other animals. Does it want to come and say hello, or would it rather go elsewhere? And the third element is its ability to play, basically. It's introversion versus extroversion. So to that extent, it's a little bit like some of the human personality trait testing.
Yeah.
But can you narrow it down and say, well, if those are the 3 main things, a Burmese are likely to be A or B or C, or the ragdoll ones are going to be something else? So is it breed specific?
Partially. What you find is a spectrum where you get all 9 personalities across each breed, but you'll find that different breeds predominate in different spaces.
Psycho cats.
Well, no, there is one of the personality types is actually called a party animal.
Whoa,
okay.
That's our kind of cat.
You would call a psycho cat. But yeah, what you'll find is you'll find all of the felinalities, as the ASPCA calls it, in every breed, but in different ratios. So if I take Abyssinians, for example, which, a lot of people think of Abyssinians as cats that think they're dogs. They like to be around people. So clearly they're very high on the sociability to people scale. They often get on well with other dogs, so they're clearly high on that scale. But you'll still find the odd one that's very, very shy. So it's all a matter of ratio. So,
for instance, if someone had a family of dogs already and thought they were going to get a cat, then using these personality traits, the Abyssinian's obviously going to be a better choice.
Not necessarily. You would then test every cat. The only downside of this, or perhaps it's an upside, is that the testing's not reliable until over 6 months of age.
Okay.
So if, for example, you want a cat who's the leader of the band, okay, that's actually the name of the personality type. They like
Top Cat. You know that cartoon?
They're adventurous, but they're affectionate, and they're very confident, so they do well around dogs. And so you would actually go out and specifically seek the personality type known as leader of the band rather than a breed per se. And that's why it's so good for shelter animals, because instead of a row of cats in cages, all of which frankly look pretty nice, you can then say, okay, now I can tell a little bit more about what this cat is actually like.
Right. You just described Kaye to a T. She's leader of the pack.
Leader of the band.
Leader of the band.
Yep. And if, for example, you're looking for a cat that's not quite so forward, a cat that's a bit more, wants to be around you, very, very social, but perhaps not as adventurous, you'd go for a personal assistant. And this is the kind of cat that just wants to be with you. It'll press the keys on your computer. It'll sit in your lap while you're watching TV.
The lackey.
It'll help you with your chores. It's the little cat that follows you around. And again, you'll see quite a few of the Asian breeds in that category.
Is there any evidence to suggest that cats coming from different cultures, say America, Britain, Middle East, wherever, New Zealand, are different to other cats? My daughter brought her cat out from LA and it was the coolest cat. It was like, chill, baby,
Well, it may be a personality issue or a felinality issue, but certainly it's fair to say that Anglos don't know what to do with cats. I had an extraordinary conversation with an international cat judge who was working in the Middle East. And he said, he went down to this cat show and everybody brought their pet cats on leashes and they all went out the back and had a picnic lunch on the grass and all the cats were let off their leashes and wandered around and said hello to each other and then went back on their leashes and went home. So clearly there's a lot of potential development for cats as pets that Australia really hasn't explored. And I can't tell you whether that's just because those cats were bred in the Middle East and therefore the genetics are different, or whether it's cultural. I suspect a little of both. In other words, the cats over there are bred to be more personable, and the less personable ones perhaps don't make it through to pet ownership. Whereas in Australia, of course, a huge percentage of cats that are owned in Australia actually come from semi-owned parents. So all of the domestic moggies that people own, about 60-70% of those come from non-owned parents. In other words, from strays or ferals or animals that are fed but not loved. Sure. And it's what the mother teaches the kittens in the first 8 weeks that often determines their view on the world for their whole lives.
Okay.
Wow. I can tell we've got so much more to learn. Dr. Jo Sillince, a pleasure to have you join us, and I'm sure people can track down a bit more information on your website, which is
3ws.petsaustralia.org.
Thank you.
Good to chat. See you.
You're listening to VETtalk, heard every week right here on vettalkradio.com.au, or you can check us out in the iTunes store. It's absolutely free.
Okay, is your pet desexed? As it happens, in Australia, the majority of pets already are, but the South Australian government wants to make it compulsory for all pets to be desexed before being sold, meaning breeders, shelters and the few pet shops that still sell puppies and kittens will need to do it before they hand them over.
But the AVA, the Australian Veterinary Association, disagrees. And to find out why, on the line we have Dr. Anne Fowler, who's the president of the South Australian division of the AVA.
Dr. Fowler, thank you for joining us. How frustrating is it for you to see that yet again this bogeyman of mandatory desexing has come about, thinking that it's going to solve the problems of unwanted animals?
It is quite frustrating. I mean, what we need to remember is that around 80% of pets are desexed currently. Yes, it's chasing down the factors as to why that remaining 20% don't get desexed, but I think some of the issue that really hasn't been explored is there's many reasons for that. It's not just financial, although it is for many people, but there are actually social and also cultural reasons for why pets aren't desexed. And I'm not sure that our desire in South Australia to pursue mandatory desexing is going to pick up that critical 20%, because it's that 20% that are contributing to the big problems that places such as RSPCA and other welfare agencies are seeing each spring, summer right now. Puppies and kittens, unwanted animals are arriving in shelters.
It's also rather unusual in that, the South Australian Dog and Cat Management Board, which is a great name anyway, has always had this reputation as leading Australia with all kinds of resources and plans to make the managing of pets really good. And yet somehow we've got this committee made up of goodness knows who, of 32 people who are supposed to, come up with an all-abiding system for the rest of the state to abide by.
I think the citizens' jury had a real challenge on their hands. They weren't just asked to comment on compulsory on desexing as an issue. They were asked to comment on microchipping, for example, how to control unwanted cats, with what sort of programs are suitable. They were asked to really review how we identify pets and their owners in this state, relating probably at a national, state and even down to a council level. So their brief was quite wide, and I think that, again, it was great to see that this group of 32, normal Australians, normal South Australians, really put an effort in to getting an answer. The challenge is, I think there was a lot of information for them to cover in what was a short period of time, and many of these issues are quite complex.
Were these people people with a vested interest, as in, they came from rescue groups or whatever, or were they just Mum and Dad Joe public pet owners?
These people were a little self-selected in as much as they had gone to a government website and said that they would like to be on the jury. It was very interesting. It was a range of people with a range of different ages and backgrounds and experiences. Certainly not all cultural aspects of our society were represented, but that, again, may actually be a cultural thing. I'm not really sure we saw that anyone had a particular wheelbarrow to push, if you like, maybe one or two, but at the same time, when you feel passionate about an issue, then a citizens' jury is a way to at least get that issue voiced. And that certainly happened, for instance, around one lady was very passionate about trialling the idea of a trap, neuter and release for cats as a way of managing cats, whereas she'd been frustrated with possibly the approach to date, which was, a good cat's a dead cat, which is not something that many cat owners would feel comfortable about, and neither did she. And this became an avenue for her to at least voice her concerns and try and work towards a solution. So although you might say she had a vested interest, I think it at least created a forum where at least the government agencies got to hear all points of view, and that's really what the minister was in fact after, was to hear what our community was saying, even though there might have been polarity in that.
Mm-hmm. So, given that this has been out now for over a week, and people have had a chance to give their point of view, do you think that public opinion now is swaying more towards what you're saying, or are they still on the side of the government and the jury and thinking, okay, let's desex the lot?
I think really where we need to head is to finalise the details and attempt to get the government to commit to a sensible time of desexing. I think as a prospective pet owner, I would like to have control over, if you like, how my pet was desexed, rather than my breeder doing possibly a bulk deal with minimal pain relief and analgesia and care, because that animal has to be desexed before the point of sale. I think there are many people for whom, their pet dog is like a pet child, and
most of us.
I think many of us are in that situation. And so we'd certainly like the options that we may get around what the vet offers in terms of desexing. Just simply doing them as a bulk lot is going to be the challenge. So I do think that vets can see that, neonatal desexing is challenging. Early age desexing, although not all of our members agree with it, many of our members are happy to do that. We're happy to contribute to the issue, to solving the problem of unwanted pets, but really needs to be done with some sense. And so trying to desex puppies at 5 and 6 weeks of age is just not what we feel is correct. And I think many pet owners would be concerned about their prospective pet having to go through that procedure ahead of time. I think that we can desex animals before they're sexually mature, and that's really where the legislation should be heading.
One last question. Is it possible for the AVA to tell its members not to desex them early, not to do bulk deals, and not to do desexing without pain relief?
In many ways, our members are, we need to remember, all small business owners trying to get by in what are often difficult times. And certainly as our economy is slowing and we talk about recessions and the like, the disposable dollar is something that we essentially get to work with. You know, you don't have to have a pet to be healthy or have a job. I think we will find people who are reluctant to be told what to do, but at the same time I can see that certainly some of our members will take an opportunity and you know, try to make it work for both the client and the animal. At the end of the day, what we have to do is comply with law. We'd like the law to be reasonable and fair and consider the welfare of the animal and still meet, ideally, its objectives. But at the same time, yes, I think we may have some people who say, well, I think the situation we're really not after is our members saying to people, break the law and dissect your pet older. That's almost a silly situation to put us as veterinarians in. This Act hasn't been reviewed since 95. We're likely to have to wear this Act for another 20 years. What we're after is a sensible, practical solution that does address the problems of unwanted pets, but still keeps the welfare of the responsible pet-owning public animals in mind.
Dr. Anne Fowler, thank you very much for joining us on VETtalk.
And that was Dr. Anne Fowler, President of the South Australian Division of the Australian Veterinary Association.
Well, South Australia's in the news for all sorts of reasons this week. It's also in the news because they've got a huge number of snake bites happening to dogs and cats, and there's a push to have electric shock collars used to help desensitise and, I guess, give dogs aversion therapy. Now, it's going to cause a bit of controversy because, of course, not everyone likes them. They're legal in many of the states around the country, but they're successfully used overseas in the US and places like that.
They get misused, don't they, by the wrong people, basically?
Oh, only if they can get their hands on them. But, you know, they're absolute idiots if they do that. And the actual shocking part of it is that it's only a little zzz, and if you've ever had one of those 9-volt batteries and had your sibling tell you, put that on your tongue, it's no worse than that.
We laugh at that, but I think for some dogs it can be a little bit traumatic. But I guess...
in the right hands, trainers, qualified trainers.
I was just going to say, if it saves them from attacking and trying to catch snakes and then they get bitten by snakes, then, it's probably a good thing. We'd like to know what you think, though. Just let us know.
Give us a call or email.
Go to vettalkradio.com.au, and in the top right-hand corner of the page, you'll see a Contact Us thing, and just put in snakes feedback.
Yay! We'd love to hear from you. Well, if you have a larger breed of dog, or you know someone who does, stick around, because our next story is all about a potentially deadly condition. Now, it's called gastric dilation and volvulus syndrome, GDV, or actually more commonly known as bloat. Now, we tracked down ARH's veterinary surgeon, Dr. Sarah Goldsmid, Sydney's biggest privately owned emergency and specialist centre, the Animal Referral Hospital, to try to find out what's happening and how pet owners can avoid putting their own pets at risk. Dr. Sarah, hello.
Hi, how are you?
Very well indeed, and I know you've had a busy day in surgery, so thank you for making time to talk to us.
Not a problem.
How many cases of bloat would you normally see in a week, and how many have you had in this recent spike?
Well, we would probably average, and it does vary a little bit, but we probably average 2 to 3 a week. But recently the week we had was about 7 cases. I don't know why we suddenly had a big spike, but I'm not sure if there was some reason for that, but it was certainly a lot more than normal.
Could have been the latest episode of The Voice or something.
Maybe.
Too much excitement in the household.
Full moon or something.
But seriously, what is it? How is it caused? And what are some of the things people can do to prevent it happening in the future?
Bloat is actually, the proper term is gastric dilatation volvulus, or GDV. So it's not just a bloated stomach, it's actually a bloated and twisted stomach.
Ouch.
And we don't really know why some dogs get it, but there's certainly things that increase the risk of them getting it. So it could be their breed, so Great Danes and German Shepherds, Labradors, Rottweilers, big dogs are more prone to getting it. Dogs that eat really quickly.
And some of those breeds do eat very fast.
And if they exercise right at the time that they're eating, that's not a good thing. And some dogs, if they're particularly stressed, if they're boarding or away from home, that can give them an increased risk of getting it. So there are quite a few factors.
And what is the most important thing for anyone to do if they suspect that their dog does have a twisted stomach?
The main thing is get to a vet as quickly as possible. So it is a life-threatening condition, and they can die very quickly. They can die within half an hour of starting the bloat. Some dogs will last many hours with it if it's not so severe at the beginning, but it is a important thing to get to a vet quickly.
So what are the signs or symptoms that people can be alerted to?
Often the dog just looks uncomfortable. They try to vomit, but they don't actually produce any vomit. So they might drool or look swollen in their belly, but they just can't vomit any food out. Dogs that get really bad will collapse and just won't be able to move.
So the idea then is throw them in the car and race off to your animal referral hospital emergency centre if you're in Sydney, or if in your other places to get to an emergency centre fast. So what do you do when they get there? Can you untwist the tummy?
You can't without surgery. So really the only way to treat them successfully is surgery. Occasionally a dog will come in that just has the stomach dilated but it hasn't twisted yet. And if you're lucky enough to have one of those, we can pass a stomach tube and the stomach's okay. But in most cases, they've already twisted, and in that case, really surgery is the best option. You have to manage them first for the shock because the blood flow is really bad, so we have to give them lots of fluids and pain relief because they're really uncomfortable. And as soon as they're stable, then we take them to surgery.
And how many of these cases are likely to recover if you get them to the emergency vet in time?
If we get them to surgery, of all the cases we see, we have over 87% that will survive and do well. Now, it's actually near 100% if their stomach's still okay when we get in there. So the biggest risk when we get in there is that part of the stomach might have died off because of damage to its blood supply. If that happens, then their prognosis is much worse. But if their stomach's okay when we get in there, then we can save almost all of them. If they don't have such a healthy stomach, then the prognosis is a little bit worse, probably about 60% chance or so of surviving. Once they have that happening. But overall, nearly 90% we can save.
So I imagine the surgery and the intensive care afterwards is not particularly cheap. Is this sort of covered by pet insurance?
Absolutely, and that's the biggest thing I could recommend is to get pet insurance if you can, because that will cover you for this emergency. And it can be expensive, particularly, you're talking about a large dog that needs surgery, usually at 2 in the morning or, some abnormal time, and it can cost $6,000 to $10,000 by the time you've had surgery and aftercare, particularly if they are really sick and need plasma or blood transfusions and intensive care afterwards.
That sounds like another emergency case coming right now, but we'll press on just for a moment. And the main thing that I guess I'd like to ask is how can people stop their dogs eating too fast or quickly or, getting this happening to them? What's the main thing you'd recommend?
Well, certainly the amount that you feed your dog at one time is worth kind of monitoring. So if you have a dog that you're worried is prone to eating quickly, I'd probably feed them 2 smaller meals in the day rather than one big meal, once a day. And I'd be careful with the type of food that you give. So if they tend to eat a certain type of food quickly, then just give small amounts at a time. A lot of dogs that we see will eat a lot of bones in one go. That's not a good thing. If they gulp their food down and then drink a lot of water, you probably need to limit their water right at the same time. It's really watching what your dog does when it eats and being careful what you do with the dog around the time of eating. So keeping an eye on that is helpful, and training your dog to eat a small amount at a time.
And you can get those bowls, can't you, with the little fingers and little rivulets in them, basically, that they can't sort of just hoover it up.
Whatever works for your dog. We try that. And, certain dogs will just inhale their food. They just, will love their food so much. So you just have to feed them a small amount at a time. Just don't give them the whole lot at once.
Well, maybe give them something they don't like. Dr. Sarah Goldsmid, I really thank you very, very much for your time, and I really hope you don't have another week like last week where you had all these bloat cases. Well,
I don't mind if I can save the animals. It's kind of satisfying when you know you've fixed them and they go home happy. But it was kind of crazy.
Oh, thank you so much. We'll look forward to having you back again.
Thank you very much.
All right.
Dementia. It happens in humans and it also happens in our dogs. Or in the case of dogs, it's called CCD, or canine cognitive dysfunction. But would you know the signs of dementia in your dog and what can be done about it?
Well, in the next week or so, we'll be bringing you an amazing story about a project being undertaken at the Brain and Mind Research Institute at the University of Sydney, looking literally for a cure for dementia in humans and also in our dogs.
But they need more data, if at all possible. Now, to help out with that, there's a short online survey which you can take to work out whether your dog is showing any signs of dementia, and we'll give you details of that survey site in a moment. But in the meantime, have a listen to Dr. Sarah Toole. She's the Dog Dementia Trial Co-ordinator at the Regenerative Neuroscience Group. She'll explain what to look for.
This particular patient, his symptoms were what we call an altered sleep-wake cycle. So he was spending a lot more time sleeping during the day and spending a lot of time awake at night. He also was very anxious at night, couldn't settle down, and some disorientation. So instead of using his doggy door, he would go and sit at the other door, sliding door near the doggy door rather than going out through the doggy door. He was also exhibiting symptoms of wall staring. So he would stand and stare at the wall, and that's one of the typical symptom of cognitive dysfunction. Sometimes these animals will walk under a piece of furniture like a table or a chair, and they can't work out how to back out or how to get out from underneath it. And also this patient had some changes in his toileting behaviour. So instead of going out into the back of the garden, he started going on the concrete area in the back patio. So for a lot of dogs, they end up having house soiling. So they forget their learned behaviours of going outside to the toilet.
Okay, interesting. So how do people get hold of this, I guess you can call it a survey, to find out if their dogs are suffering from CCD?
The Cognitive Dysfunction Rating Scale is available online as our webpage, which is the RNG, Regenerative Neuroscience Group webpage, and click on the tab Dog Dementia Trial, and there's a link there that will take them to the rating scale. So simply Googling it should come up, and it takes about 5 minutes to go through the series of questions, click on the answers, and then they have the option to put in their email address, and then we'll be in contact with them with more information.
And that was Dr. Sarah Toole, Dog Dementia Trial Coordinator at the Regenerative Neuroscience Group. It's hard to say sometimes, isn't it?
Hard to say, easy to do, I think is the ad.
But I'll tell you what, the survey that you can take, it's absolutely free and there's no obligation for anyone, but it might actually help you discover if your dog, or cat, I guess, but certainly dogs in this case, have any problems. And the website to go to is www.rng.org.au/CCDR. We'll also put that link on our website. Okay, KB, it's time for you to shine. What's the latest in the pet and animal news from around the world?
Well, we all think that our dogs and cats should win prizes, but there's a 5-year-old boxer called Curtis from Virginia who's just taken out the 2015 Hambone Award. Now, it's a bit of a dubious honour because it's actually for the Pet Insurance Claim of the Year. Now, what happened is that Curtis earned the nomination after he gobbled and swallowed a shish kebab. It was on a wooden barbecue skewer. I'm sure he's not the first and won't be the last to do so. Now, the vets did an ultrasound and endoscopy but couldn't find the skewer at all, so they figured it must have broken down and, it would pass via natural means. Curtis remained his usual chirpy self until about a year after the event, when he suddenly stopped eating. X-rays revealed a large mass near his liver, possibly cancer, so they did surgery and in fact discovered that it wasn't cancer. It was actually the missing skewer which had perforated through his intestines and lodged near his liver, and of course the big mass was actually scar tissue.
So this skewer stayed in there for a year?
Yep.
Unbelievable.
Yep.
Okay.
All the more reason to keep an eye out when you're having
Where do you find
barbecue.
these stories?
I can't tell you. I'd have to kill you.
All right.
Yep. Okay, still on interesting news, the 2015 Financial Health Barometer. It's more interesting than it actually sounds. It's an annual survey carried out by RaboDirect to find out what Aussies are spending their money on, including how much we spend on our beloved pets, and how that actually correlates with our nation's happiness overall. Now, apparently, Aussies are more likely to forego warmth, lighting, and even turn their TVs off in an attempt to curb electricity usage rather than cut spending on their pampered pet. In fact, 16% of Aussies would even take a second job rather than spend less on their furry friends.
Well, I should just remind you, when the temperature was approaching 40 degrees, we brought our chooks inside and turned the air conditioning on.
Ah, yes.
We're not in that percentage, obviously. And that doesn't mean we're earning a lot. It just means
we're nuts.
We're nuts, yeah.
We're nuts for our pets.
We'd like to actually hear from you if you do something really, really silly, like to pamper your pooch or pussy cat or whatever you've got there.
Yeah, there's lots more info on that particular survey, and I like the other one in the survey. Pet owners regard their pets as essential to their overall well-being, with just under 50% stating that keeping pets is more important to them than being able to socialise with friends or being able to retire before the age of 65.
Okay. Keep the wife, keep the pet. Keep the wife, keep the pet. They actually cost about the same amount each year, but that's another story.
Okay, we'd like to hear back. Now, just quickly, in Melbourne, apparently they've worked out which is the most popular breed of dog, and it's actually a mixture.
Mm-hmm.
Yep, Fairfax Media crunched the numbers from councils and worked out the Maltese Cross is the undisputed top dog, ranking as the most popular breed in 83 Melbourne suburbs. However, of course, the Maltese Club of Victoria isn't too rapt about that, just warning that, unfortunately, you never know quite what you're going to get when you do get a mixed breed of any kind. And once some of these puppy farmers and backyard breeders see them, they see them as a money-making tool. And you might get a dog that has trouble with dental problems and things like that, because Maltese and Shih Tzus, you kind of get that crunched up mouth.
Do you remember we came across a lady who had a lovely little white fluffy, and we said, "Oh, a lovely dog, what kind is it?" And she said, "Oh, it's a Bichon Frise." There was no way it was a Bichon Frise. It was a Maltese Cross.
Yeah, close. Anyway, just for the record, the Maltese Cross Shih Tzu is the most popular. Second popular is the Labrador. 63 suburbs, it's the second most popular. Jack Russell Terriers, and followed up by Cavoodles at number 4.
Well, fair enough. Cavoodles, what are they? Cavalier King Charles Spaniels crossed with
a poodle of some kind.
Okay. Right.
And that's our news wrap-up this week on VETtalk.
Good on you. Thanks for joining us again. That's all we have for you this week. And we'll be back again next Saturday on vettalkradio.com.au and also through the iTunes store.
All absolutely free. See you then.
Bye.